Hi everyone. This is a quick video to kind of summarize a few things that are missing from the study guides. So want to start preparing you for the exam. So here's how that's going to go. I have put up an exam review video. This will be part of that, and I'll do a lengthier one as well. A lot of people were confused about where's the final exam study guide. Well, it's all three of them. So I went ahead and just put those all together for you in one to make that a little bit easier because it is a cumulative exam. On Blackboard, I went ahead and wrote about the exam. This right here is for the 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock. You're on a completely different day and time, but the same thing will happen. And a lot of people are emailing me about this. So I guess you guys aren't watching videos. But hopefully it'll get to you. The exam for the 11 o'clock class, which is what we're looking at right now, is on Monday. I'm going to open it at 8 a.m. and close at 10 p.m. This is totally different from what I did last time. You can log on anytime that day during that time frame and take the exam. You will have 2 hours, just like a regular final exam period. If you have accommodations, obviously I will apply those. There is a mechanism and a way for me to do that. So if you are someone who gets extra time on tests, rest assured you will get that extra time. The questions will be randomized, but I'm going to allow you to backtrack. The exam is 50 questions, multiple choice and true false, and it is cumulative. Okay, so what does that mean? Basically, it means all three study guides. So I've condensed all three study guides right there on that link. There, obviously, the majority of the exam or bulk of the exam is on the third study guide because that's the new material. So there's going to be more of that on there, and that should be your focus. Now, I have left off a few things because, as I have mentioned, this edition of the book has been greatly rearranged. So, and that's not always a good thing. So we're going to go over today, in way of review, some new information, but it's somewhat review at the same time. So I think this will be a very helpful way to kind of almost be an end lecture on what we've been talking about all semester. And there used to be a chapter just called warrants. And if you remember the Toulmin model, warrant is a part of it. It's basically, if you're going to make a claim like, "All bunny rabbits have short tails," you better have some data or evidence to say we all have short tails. I don't even have a freaking tail. All right, so how do we know that whatever evidence we provide is valid, is good in any type of research that we're doing? That's always the case. It's kind of like anytime my mom reads stuff online and she sends it to me, "Oh, you gotta, at first with COVID-19, she said vitamin C will kill it. You need to be drinking vitamin C and taking extra vitamin C every day." Then she read something different. So she's claiming that vitamin C can cure the COVID-19. I don't know where that data came from. Is it good data? Is it logical? Does it, is it quality data? And we said that's what the warrant is. So we're going to just kind of step back for a minute and look at all three paradigms that we've talked about. We have talked about doing research in the scientific method, discovery, quantitative, functional. We have talked about doing research in the interpretive paradigm, qualitative, ethnography, interviews, okay? And we've now talked about doing research from a critical perspective, rhetoric, social justice, artifacts, analysis of power and value differences. But how do we know when someone gives us statistics or gives us an interview or a story that it's been done well? That was kind of the other part of this class. Of course, we now know these three ways of looking at things that academics look at things, but how do we know they've done a good job? And that's what the warrant says. How do I know you've collected the best statistical data and analyzed it correctly? How do I know you didn't taint the interview or that the person lied? How do I know that this critical event is really happening and you didn't make up parts of it. So those are the warrants, and that's what we look for. So that's where we're going to start a little bit today. So I'm actually going to start in the interpretive. And how do we know when an interpretive study is a good study? Well, there are standards for evaluating evidence, that's the data or claims that I'm talking about, in every paradigm. So we do need an adequacy of evidence in the interpretive paradigm, but evidence in the interpretive paradigm obviously isn't statistics. It's the story itself. And we talked about that stories need to have coherence and fidelity. That was Fisher. Remember, we just did that. So stories should make sense. They should ring true. We also say another way we know we've got good information or good stories is what we call theoretical saturation. That the more people I continue to interview, I have stopped finding out new things. So say I interview someone about how they felt during quarantine, and I interviewed 20 people, and basically by the time I get to the 20th person, I'm hearing the same thing over and over again. Nothing new is coming out of these interviews. That basically says, you know what, you've reached saturation. You're saturated. You're not going to find anything else. You've done your job. Now, if you just do one interview, there's no way you can tell if you've reached that notion of, is there anyone else having a different experience? So that's why we do multiple interviews. A negative case analysis. Are there a lot of counter examples to counter what you're trying to say? If there are, that could be trouble. Okay, so if you interview 20 people and they say, this quarantine has been the best time of my life, I've been so happy, I've gotten so much done, my guess is that wouldn't be what most people would find. And if you did find that, that might suggest, wow, did you interview like the most positive people in the world? Did you get a good sample? Maybe, you didn't pick the right folks. So we look for counterexamples. We also look for, does this story transfer to others that we know? And we're kind of doing that now, looking back at, times in our history when people had to be more isolated, and it seems to transfer. The stories relate. It checks out. And that's kind of where I go with confirmability. How do you know participants are telling the whole truth? So it's difficult. You have seen people on the nightly news. What was it? Brian Williams got fired from NBC. He now works for MSNBC, but he was the nightly news anchor for NBC. And he was let go because he embellished the I was in the war in the helicopter story and got shot at, which never happened. So we have to check. Just because someone says this happened to them, did it really happen? I'll give you a good example. A student came to me and said, I missed class Monday. I missed the exam or a paper. Something was due, and she missed it. And she said, to be honest, I'm not doing well. I was going to Hawaii or coming back from Hawaii, and our plane lost an engine, and it was just complete panic. We all thought we were going to die. And, I was like, oh, wow, this is a really good story. Does it have coherence? Does it have fidelity? No. In my book, it didn't. As a teacher, I'm like, bing, 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 bing. This does not sound right. So I was a little mean. I admit, I Googled it to see if this really happened. Did a flight in Hawaii lose a plane engine and almost go down? Sure enough, it did happen. It was in the news on the day she said. Everything was there. She ended up doing a great case study about it later in the class. But I checked. You keep document trails. You check in narrative, and you confirm what people are saying. You just don't take it at face value that they're telling you the truth. And does it have relevance from one culture to the next? So storytelling and interviews are really about checking up on people, make sure they're telling the truth. Are we getting consistency? Do the stories make sense? Do they ring true? Are they relevant? That's how we know we're getting good evidence. Okay? All right. Critical paradigm, totally different. How do you know how do you know that essay that you read or didn't read? I don't know. How do you know that essay by Dr. Winslow is a good essay? Well, there's a couple of things. First, he had to put forth an ideology that exists, some set of ideas that structure a group's reality. And actually, he did that. He put forth an ideology that we know, that we can relate to, that exists. He also looked at the notion of hegemony, which we talked about in the critical, when events are interpreted as such a way to promote the interests of one group. Certainly, we can see this is an instance where the TV show promoted the interests of only one particular type of group. And then look back at the standards for evaluating evidence. They're very similar to interpretive. Is the argument logic and consistent? Does it make sense? Did the researcher capture everything from the standpoint of the people and himself? Did the researcher separate himself from the setting? And was praxis or social justice involved? And we would say, yes, this was a good piece. Obviously, it was published. It showed a critical set of ideas. It showed dominance and promoted interest of other groups. It was coherent and logical. Reflexivity is interesting in this one because I think Winslow inserts himself into it just a little too much, but there was still reflexivity, and there was certainly a praxis or a social justice angle to society. That's how we know a critical piece has been well done. And last, how do we know that a social science or a scientific method or discovery has been well done? Well, we go back to these three words, which I know are new for you, but did the study have precision, power, and parsimony? These are the three things we look for to say, was this a good quantitative scientific study? Has to have precision. You have to operationalize variables. Remember way back when I was getting on you to say, you can't just say communication is a variable. I want to see how communication affects relationships. And I was like, what kind of communication, what kind of relationships? I was really trying to get you to operationalize and be very precise, because we look at very precise and specific things when we do scientific method. Power. Does the test have the ability to detect effects? And if we do statistics right and we run the right statistical tests, we know that, yes, it does. But if we do the wrong statistical tests or we fudge the statistics, it may not be a very powerful study. And that's knowing kind of what statistics go with what procedures and what they yield, etc. And parsimony. Anytime you have a quantitative or a scientific method study, it can say a lot in a succinct way because it's numbers. Each night you've been hearing daily totals about how many people have died or how many people are affected. I mean, that's an amazing amount of information we're getting around the whole US in a very quick and succinct way. And that's what scientific is about: precision, power, and parsimony. So I hope this was really the last part of anything that was on the study guide, that this just gives you a framework as we move forward and go back and say, you need to know a little bit about each one of these paradigms. What makes, how we conduct research, what makes the research good research, and what the theories say. That's the theory part is a little more 300, and hopefully those pieces came together for you this semester. So that's what I wanted to kind of do for you, just to kind of frame our last lecture. I will be going in depth over the study guide. We have a whole week to prepare, almost two, for our final. So do not stress out. We will have one more clicker chance, and that clicker chance will be some practice clicker questions over the final exam review. So hang on for those till next week. There is no homework. The last thing we have is the final. We did it, okay? We're